The lawmaker representing Borno South Senatorial District, Ali Ndume, has called for the sacking of more inactive ministers from President Bola Tinubu's cabinet. The lawmaker also applauded President Tinubu's recent cabinet restructuring, particularly the creation of the Ministry of Regional Development to oversee all regional commissions. According to him, President Tinubu delivered a master stroke in last week's cabinet reshuffle, adding that more of those who have not delivered should be sent off. Well, joining us in our Abuja studio is the Group CEO, Global Investment and Trade Company, Baba Yusuf, to talk more on this. Good morning. It's good to have you join us.
Good morning, Veronica. Good to be here.
Great. Now, there's been divergent views with regards to the recent cabinet reshuffle. And there are those who think that it's a master stroke from the president, and there are those who are saying that this is a strategy ahead of 2027. But from your perspective, what are your major takeaways from this recent cabinet reshuffle?
Well, for me, it's a normal milestone in governance. Of course, one cannot take away politics out of it. It is politics that brought us where we are here today. It is a democracy, and the democracy has a calendar, and all politicians will have a strategy for state power, for sustainability on one hand, on the other hand, to try to deliver good governance. Mr. President hinted that he will rejig his cabinet, about a month or so ago. Some of us have gone ahead to be calling for a review of or refreshment of the cabinet. I remember I wrote about it in my column as well. So for us, it's a welcome development. I think skeptics will always come to say one or two things. Bottom line for me, it is refreshing that Mr. President has taken a step to rejig his cabinet. Veronica, remember that for 8 years, almost 8.5 years, a former president did not consider it fit to rejig his cabinet. And that is how we were wobbling for 8 years without performance. So here we are, Mr. President has rejigged his cabinet, and I'm very happy to see some of the appointments that have been made. I will call it rejigging and also restructuring, because I saw some, restructuring of the ministries. And of course, he moved around some ministers for better performance. So I think it's a welcome development as far as I'm concerned.
And the lawmaker representing Borno South Senatorial District has also called for the sack of more slacking ministers. This brings me to ask whether it's really about sacking ministers or a change of personnel, or perhaps a follow-up to ensure that these persons who are appointed do their jobs to the best of their ability.
Thank you very much for the way you landed, Veronica. As leaders in our own right with experience of how leadership is done, sometimes it's not about the people you appoint, it's about how you marshal man and material to deliver. As it is, yes, I also agree to an extent with Senator Ndume that there are some ministers that are not performing up to par. But then we should also remember that the buck stops at the table of Mr. President. He is accountable to Nigerians. He is serving Nigerians, of course, through the ministers. And even if the ministers are underperforming and Mr. President feels he wants to work with them, there is nothing Nigerians can do about it, but to continue keeping the foot of Mr. President close to the fire for him to deliver. How he delivers, that's his call. Of course, there is no constitutional provision that forces Mr. President to rejig his cabinet or to change his cabinet. So I think it's a welcome development that we are all adding our voices to it. I had some qualms with some of the ministries, and I felt some of the ministers should go, but I know there are strategic and political reasons for Mr. President not to have taken those decisions. Of course, I hope that in the next coming month, he will also look at how he will realign the cabinet for better performance, because unless you have round pegs in round holes, even if you try to assert yourself for people to deliver, people cannot give what they don't have. And I think that is what Senator Ndume is talking about, in which case I will agree with him.
Interesting. I would like to know which of the ministries you have qualms with and you're looking forward to it being rejigged or restructured by the president? And also, how will this then reinvigorate the cabinet to deliver efficiently at the end of the day?
Well, first of all, I will answer the last and then go back and give you some of my views with regards to how the changes, are being made, and I think Mr. President is doing that. For example, I think a round hole situation is happening in the Ministry of Defense, with all due respect to the two ministers. We have two ministers there. Veronica, they are struggling to deliver. Of course, in the last couple of weeks, we have some improvements with regards to insecurity, but sustainability is key. In fairness to the two ministers also, they don't have what you call sectorial expertise ab initio in a very highly specialized sector at a very critical time in the history of this country, for a sector that is key to the turning around of the economy, to the turning around of our social development situation, etc. Unless we deal with security, every other thing will not fall in place. And I felt that there is need to, look at that portfolio. These two gentlemen have excellent track records in other areas. Of course, I'm also a proponent of when you get to this stage, you become a generalist, not a specialist. And therefore, you can bestride any sector or ministry. Otherwise, we will also say that the president should have some specialist skill. Mr. President is the president commander-in-chief. But of course, after 1.5 years, we should be able to say whether the generalist aspect or the strategic aspect of it is working or not. I think Mr. President, without wanting to second-guess him, is trying to struggle to ensure that in making those changes, he does not upset the apple cart, in such a way and manner that he gets the right people to. It's not just about replacement, but of course getting the right people to replace, and of course timing is key. So those are the kind of ministries that I would have wanted to see some. You don't necessarily have to fire them, but probably realign for better performance so you get the best out of those ministers. But that being said, he is the CEO of the country. We just hope that the KPIs will change going forward, meaning the key performance indicators, so that you are able to compress people to deliver. It is happening at a very interesting time, last quarter of the year. I hope Mr. President will look at it in terms of making people to deliver more, because Mr. President has done a lot, interestingly, but the ministries or the cabinet or the handlers of the Mr. President have also not just done justice to the articulation of the tangible, impacts that those efforts have been, the efforts that have been put so far. That being said, we look forward to better performance. We'll continue asking for it because the country really deserves and needs those better performance from the cabinet of the president.
All right, so still staying with you now, the matter of the KPIs changing, I am wondering what should that be or what should change in the KPIs moving forward now? Because based on this, the report is saying that a scientific assessment of their performance was used to address those who should be weeded out and those who should perhaps be moved to another ministry, so to speak. I'm wondering what more you are hoping to see with the key performance index at the end of the day.
Thank you very much for that question. So first of all, let's step back a bit. Mr. President was clear that he set up a platform to evaluate the performance of the ministers last year, put it on the table of the Special Advisor on Policy Coordination, Hajia Hadiza Bala Usman. And one of the things or the key reasons that we have heard on the media from the presidency that was used for this particular performance review was the platform, the online platform that was provided for Nigerians or the publics to appraise the ministers, for them to go in there, which is fantastic. But the snag with that is, Veronica, we have about 60% of Nigerians that have been declared multidimensionally poor. When Mr. President took over. Of course, the socio-economic vagaries have not become better, and I've not seen indexes that have shown significant, scaling down, which presupposes that the most impacted that we would really hear from do not even have access to this platform. We don't also know how much of the data of Nigerians, what is the percentage of Nigerians that actually went into that portal to give their own feedbacks. But Mr. President made a very clear remark to the Federal Executive Council to mandate ministers to go out there and speak to Nigerians with regards to what they did, which is a clear indication that some ministers were sitting on their hands or they are camera shy. You don't have to be camera shy. If you are camera shy, your work will speak for you. I am a proponent of your work speaks for you, because if there are tangible impacts, they will show. They will not be hidden. Other people will speak to them. Now, speaking to the key performance indicators, in my view, some of the key performance indicators that should be included goes back to what I was saying earlier. Ministers being unable to articulate some of the performances of their ministries or of the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So I think my own small 10 kobo advice is to have a better dashboard for performance, tangible impacts and intangible impacts. And to say, for example, per quarter, for each minister, these are the tangible impacts Mr. President wants to see every month at the Federal Executive Council. These are the deliverables, and by the end of the month, these are what we have done. And to do within that framework for the Office of the Performance Evaluation and for Mr. President to say, I want to see impact assessment. So far, and it's not President Tinubu administration alone, including President Muhammadu Buhari and President Jonathan. Impact assessment is a critical success factor to evaluate performance of administration, apart from optics, apart from politics. And if that is done, the chief executive can really know for sure what his policies or strategies are impacting, on the people. So within the KPIs, the impact assessment should have impact dashboard, whether it is humanitarian and poverty alleviation, whether it is oil and gas, whether it is trade and investments. And those impact assessments should be stratified and clear, tangible and intangible. And in communicating to Nigerians also, I advise the cabinet to speak to the tangible and the intangible. Sometimes the intangibles are so key, but we don't talk about them. So in the key performance indicator framework, those are the things I want to see. And they should be time-bound, Veronica Alalmide. They should be time-bound, with all due respect to the cabinet. Unless they are time-bound and they are spoken to in that manner to Nigerians, because I'm a student of what you call the promise-based leadership. In a promise-based leadership, even internally, you say you are going to deliver this, the FEC will hold you to account as a Minister of Health. Have you done it before we go out to speak to the people? I will land at this for now, because this is a whole conversation that may take us an hour. But I hope this resonates with, the cabinet, Mr. President, and indeed Nigerians.
Well, this covers it to an extent. Talking about, a promise-based leadership, like you mentioned. I mean, you also talked about multidimensional poverty, how much or how many Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. The presidency, in a statement, said that, this move was aimed at cutting the cost of governance. We saw some ministries scrapped, some put under other ministries. How is this going to help when you place this, side by side with the World Bank's recent statement in terms of saying that Nigerians or Nigeria itself may have to stay the course for about 10 to 15 years in terms of its reforms? Absolutely. And of course, to add to that, the IMF also, came with a feedback last week to say that, they have reviewed that the projection of our growth is going to reduce from 3.3 to 2.9%. For the remaining of the year, which tells you that the economy is contracting. With regards to the message from the World Bank, we don't have 15 years. And that is why the administration has more work to do. With regards to that, I'm excited that about 10 months after the suspension of the erstwhile Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Eradication, Dr. Betta Edu, now we have a substantive minister and a state minister. I believe that ministry is very key at this point in time, to try to alleviate poverty. Before now, most of those interventions Mr. President has to make do with directly dealing with the governors, and of course adding another,
workload to the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of Economy, which is, not able to make the impacts that are required. So, with regards to cost of governance, if we want to be true to ourselves, this is the largest cabinet in the history of Nigeria. Of course, I saw some restructuring with regards to taking the regional, development commissions to be under regional development ministry. Fantastic. Ministry of Livestock, wonderful. But I would have wanted to see some streamlining that will taper down the Federal Executive Council, just like what happened in the case of sports. We have gone back to the days when NSE was set up, National Sports Council, in 1962. Now, sports will be driven professionally. It doesn't have to be at that level. I believe there are some ministries also whose function could actually do not have to be at the Federal Executive Council. Now, let me be clear. The fact that an agency or department of government is not at ministerial level does not make it any less important or impactful. The National Security Advisor is not a minister, he's a key member of cabinet. For example, we have the EFCC, we have organizations, we have the Bureau for Public Enterprise. So I think our view to governance with regards to politicizing of the offices, it what increases the cost of governance and lessens the impact because of the vested interest around it. But that being said, I think there can be creativity with regards to how the cost of running those, ministries is done in such a way and manner that how they run the office is lessened. Last week also, Mr. President gave clear instructions for all ministries to taper down, their entourage and all that. But I think the icing on the cake will be in the review of the budget or making the budget for next year. Interestingly, most of the new ministers are coming at that time. I hope that this time around the budget will be done in such a way and manner, budget padding will be greatly skilled, because that is what will help to entrench fiscal discipline. Unless there's alignment between fiscal discipline and this fiscal policy, then all the monetary policy will not really turn around the economy. The impression that the monetary policy by CBN is going to do the magic is not the issue. It's fiscal discipline that is a critical success factor. So going forward, I think this is a food for thought for the administration.
Interesting. Now let's look at some of the persons that the president put forward. One of them is Bianca Odumegwu Ojukwu, wife of the late Ikemba of Inewu, that's Odumegwu Ojukwu as minister. And there are those who have been speaking with regards to her being part of those the president is putting forward now. There are those saying that the president was being strategic with regards to putting her name as being part of this new persons coming on board his cabinet, and that perhaps this might pacify those from the southeast who have been agitating, saying that there's been some form of the government not being fair to them, basically. I wonder if you see it that way, because this is also coming on the heels of the establishment of the Southeast Development Commission. Has the government been able to do enough for these persons to see that they are not being marginalized, so to speak?
Well, the issue of the Ndume is more than over and beyond the appointment of, Lady Bianca Ono as minister. As you are fully aware, there are a lot of issues on the table by the Ndume, by the Southeast, that they believe should be addressed, over and beyond this singular addition in the cabinet, interestingly coming from an opposition party. Of course, Mr. President, whether or not the move will satisfy or placate the entire Southeast, Mr. President has made a move. He has appointed a daughter of the Ndume to represent the Ndume on his cabinet, a professional, a diplomat, and from the opposition party. So I think it's a step in the right direction by Mr. President. We have the Southeast Development Commission, which is also balancing it. But of course, we've heard from leaders of the Ndume since the appointment, the reshufflement of the cabinet. The argument is they have the least number of ministers, at the Federal Executive Council. And that is what they are canvassing for. They need more representation. I wouldn't want to dwell too much on that. But I think they have spoken enough, and I think Mr. President is hearing them. One step has been made. We will see what tapers out. What is important for me as a Nigerian and as a friend of Ndigbo is that we see impacts. We see outcomes. Performance is not measured by events, but by impacts. And if one or two people are able to make those impacts, we will all be proud of a country that we call Nigeria. I hope and I pray that the issues of the Ndigbo will be looked at, and I can see they have been considered. Today we have the Southeastern Development Commission, we have this ministerial appointment. It's an ongoing conversation that I believe all Nigerians should take seriously, but governance is an ongoing business and we should focus on that.
It's an ongoing improvement. How do you react to the scrapping of the Niger Delta Ministry? We are talking about pacifying, the major groups. And recently we had elder statesman Edwin Clark saying that this is a wrong initiative and that the ministry should not have been scrapped in the first place. How's the new regional ministry going to help, or the regional commission going to help in, attending to the needs of these different groups represented in the commission?
I have a very interesting view with regards to this agitation by, with all due respect, Edwin Clark and all the North Niger Delta, sons and daughters. As far as I'm concerned, the nomenclature shouldn't be the issue by the leaders of Niger Delta or sons and daughters of Niger Delta to look at. It is the value. There was a time I was doing a research and I was speaking to the numbers and the impacts of the Niger Delta on the Niger Delta people, not on the Niger Delta leaders. We had Umpadek in the past. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but the fact is that the nomenclature shouldn't be the focus of the people. I'm not talking about the elites like us now that use every other step to politicize a conversation. What are the impacts? Where I will have a quarrel is if the budget of the NDDC will be reduced by this arrangement, and if the budget will be reduced and be shared to the other development commission. That's not what is going to happen. If the impacts, the projects that the NDDC is doing, will also be reduced. So long as the scope of the NDCC will not be reduced, we should also advise all of us to move towards inclusion. This issue of we should have our name and we should have this thing specially for us is not also showing inclusion and unity. I believe NDCC was a creation of necessity. I believe it is important. But what is important for me is the impact the politicians in the Niger Delta or in northern Nigeria or in the southwest or in the middle belt are doing on their people. These optics and narratives by the elites like us and politicians are self-serving as far as I'm concerned. What are they doing in their roles when they had the roles, and what are those of us that are on the roles are doing? Impacts are key to me. It's a welcome development. We have a regional development ministry, Veronica Olamide. We move. Let's focus on governance.
All right. We move, like you rightly said, and this time we're moving to the Ministry of Livestock Development. And there are those who think or believe that it's going to be the problem solver with regards to the matter of herder-farmer clashes and some of the security issues we've seen around this sector. I wonder if you see this ministry as being the solution to the crisis we have had to deal with when we are talking about the herder-farmer crisis.
It's a very big move by Mr. President, and I commend Mr. President for, splitting the ministry, even though, like I said, we should not focus on these agencies and thinking that it is when they become ministries that they should make impact. But the deed has been done, and importantly, it's a good hire. Dr. Maiha is one of the biggest ranchers in Nigeria. He's a fantastic gentleman when it comes to understanding livestock. So he knows his onions as far as that area is concerned. He's also having a track record of integrity, which is very important to me. Now, the strategic blueprint for the Ministry of Livestock is what will drive, the performance or the delivery vis-a-vis value addition to the economy, vis-a-vis value addition to curbing insecurity, vis-a-vis curbing the issue of incessant, Fulani headsmen or headsmen, whether they are Fulani or not, and settlers or residents, these clashes, and farmers as well. These are the things I would like to see as part of the KPIs, or key performance indicators, for the Ministry of Livestock. A lot of justification has been given by Mr. President. Mr. President has taken a leap of faith and a bold move to set up this ministry. So there is high expectation that it will solve the issue. But I think it will only solve part of the issue, because there are still political issues there. There are still social issues there that have to be addressed, because a lot of people also feel that the ministry will carve out specifically to appease a particular ethnic or tribal, group in Nigeria. So there's a lot of other things to be done on the side, apart from the Ministry of Livestock, because the people for whom the ministry is set up also need to buy into the ministry. And I'm talking about the Fulani and the other herdsmen. If they don't key into this concept and they still want to continue the way things are going, I think that we are going to have an issue there. So that is why I'm talking about the social aspect of it and the political aspect of it, which will be a distraction for the ministry itself. Of course, it will have tangential provision within the strategic blueprint of the Ministry of Livestock to deal with those social and political issues. But it's the big issue that will sit on the table of Mr. President to see how there is peripheral vision to ensure that the ministry makes impact, but to also continue appeasing people, reassuring people, and ensure that for those people that are in the livestock business, are also, or the livestock value chain, buy into this project and do other things that are necessary apart from the livestock farming issue. Like I said, the political, ethnic, and social issues, which are very important.
All right. Let's quickly put you on hold. We need to go on a break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation with you. Stay with us.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first.
Thank you for staying with us. Before we went on the break, we were talking about the recent cabinet reshuffle, where the president reshuffled his cabinet and restructured, according to some persons, his cabinet as well. And we have our guest, Baba Yusuf, who is the Group CEO, Global Investment Trade Company, speaking with us on that. Now, Baba Yusuf, you mentioned something earlier that I'd like to get your perspective on, which is the matter of strategic blueprint that should drive the impact of the livestock ministry. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what would be strategic enough that should be part of the blueprint such that we can get the needed impact from this ministry at the end of the day?
Well, the ministry has a lot of work to do, because now it has been made a ministry. They have to structure, they have to set up, they have to, have the human resource complement to drive. But I think part of the strategic blueprint should be a time-bound plan to rein in the herdsmen from the wilderness, if you like, to a location where to ranch him, which is, a specialization of Minister Nominee Maiha, to agree that they should be able to stay within a value chain and move from this nomadic type, lifestyle, which is a very big issue because, as Peter Drucker, a leadership guru, said, culture can always have strategy for breakfast, Veronica Olamide. So it's a cultural issue. It has been there for centuries, their way of life. How they are able to transform these people to move from this nomadic life to a quasi-organized, streamlined sectoral life is going to be a big Herculean task for the ministry. So the cultural reorientation, and culture is the most difficult thing to change from time immemorial. You know, we have learned from our prophets, messengers, you know, philosophers, like Prophet Abraham, Jesus, alayhi salam, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. All philosophers or thinkers will tell you, culture is the biggest issue to change. So they have a big issue to deal with, which is the culture issue. And the critical stakeholders around that, the lack of trust between the herdsmen, the farmers, settlers and residents over time, trust has been eroded. We see what is happening in Jos, we see a Plateau State and in Benue, in a lot of other places. This is an issue because unless you have buy-in of the stakeholders, you cannot deliver. So the fundamental, this critical success pillars of that strategy has to deal with the culture, has to do with the value reorientation, and of course the politics of it. And then come to the issue of the value chain, the operation, for people now to start understanding that, oh, I can actually have more, you know, from my cattle, or from my pig, or from my sheep or goat, you know, in an organized manner than this way and all that. You know, in the operational aspect of it, for it to have quick impact, short, mid to long time. And I think one of the key state power the ministry will have, and I hope Mr. President will put it in their KPI, is to say, within now and the end of first quarter of 2025, what are the quick wins so that people will be able to engender that confidence and trust for all the stakeholders to come onto the table. The Ministry of Livestock is not just for some Fulani or some herdsmen. Mark you, the herdsmen do not refer to only the Fulanis. We have other people that also have livestock that are, you know, doing it big time. So if that, they are able to achieve that inclusivity and that buy-in, then a lot of work would have been done with regards to operationalizing the ministry to achieve that success. Otherwise, we are going to have a ministry that will be sitting on a very big budget, and then by the end of next year, we are still at the blueprint stage. I hope this ministry, we have a minister that will hit the ground running. I hope that by end of quarter 1, 2025, they should be able to give Mr. President a gift of some quick wins, which will transform to quick wins for Nigerians. Very important for the Ministry of Livestock and for the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
All right. Still pointing out some of these ministries that are very important. What's your expectation for the Ministry of Blue Economy? Some have argued that it has been total silence from that ministry, and it's really not, you know, impacting the average Nigerian. There was a time it was seen as the new oil in Nigeria. So what's your expectation for that? According to the World Bank says it is a sustainable method or means of economic growth and livelihood.
Yeah, that goes to Olamide, what I was saying earlier. Sometimes, you know, Mr. President is a strategic thinker. I give it to him. But sometimes some of these initiatives are will have quick turnaround or quick impacts if you don't upgrade them to this political level, you know, and put them, you know, give them that focal point. They will run in and make impact. I totally agree with the sentiments that the Ministry of Blue Economy has not been visible, talk less of, you know, showing quick impact, which is, they can borrow from what I said with the Ministry of Livestock. Part of the strategic blueprint, which is a novel one, because the Ministry of Blue Economy is new, like I said, we have to give them timeline for start-off, for impact. But part of what makes leadership at that level possible is that you should be able to say, in the next 6 months, I must give something to the people for them to buy into this project. The blue economy is not as if it's not non-existent. It is just a nomenclature given to an industry to make it more important and more impactful, and redirect its focus, removing it from the Ministry of Water Resources. So it's not as if we are reinventing the wheel, but we need to craft a strategy around that industry and to make it sectoral focus. So I think the ministry, part of what I said earlier on, you can see reason in that if Mr. President tightens the KPI around tangible and intangible value, timeline, month on month, quarter on quarter, that will push the ministers to do the needful. They will be less political and more operational, more strategic. and less political. For the ministry, well, the minister is a generalist. He was a governor, and I think he is well-rounded as a leader. If you have the right people around you as a leader, of course, there is no limit to what you can achieve. I believe the Ministry of Bulu Economy should have done better. I believe it can do better, and I believe it has been given the opportunity to do that in the next 6 months. Otherwise, Mr. President should constructively disrupt that arrangement to see what can be done to achieve success. Don't forget, creation of that ministry led to what? Huge budget allocated to that ministry in the 2024 budget. Another budget is coming for 2025. Those are part of the things I was saying. How are they able to articulate, to tell Nigerians, this is what we have been able to achieve with what you have given us? They are not telling Mr. President. They are telling Nigerians that elected Mr. President, and makes the job of Mr. President easy. And that is why these ministers should understand the precarious position of President Tinubu in ensuring that they support him to do the needful.
Now, what do you say to those who say that this reshuffle or restructuring, as whichever way you might want to call it, is not far-reaching enough because nothing was done, particularly in the oil and gas as well as finance ministries?
Well, like I said, it's a prerogative of Mr. President. One will argue, I was speaking in another forum, another station, and I said there are 4 key issues: the economy, social development, which will address part of it, insecurity or security, poverty and all that. And then we have the issue of our foreign policy, which most times is also a reflection of domestic policy, and then of course the overall democratic process. With the issue of oil and gas, there still more need to be done. The refineries, all over 1 year, the NNPC have been promising Mr. President and Nigerians, we are not able to turn around 2 or 3 refineries for over 15 years. And one of the key decisions taken by Mr. President was the removal of subsidy. Rightly so, Albert, we should have been more strategic in planning the sequencing. And that is part of the problem. We have not been able to turn around these refineries and other issues within the value chain which are impacting on the administration. Whether or not the ministers, now we have 2 ministers, the Minister for Gas and the Minister for the Senator Lopobri, the performance now is a bit dicey to measure because, interestingly, we have the President actually holding the ministerial portfolio, even though Mr. Onanuga is aide to the President, so he never said he was the President. But it makes performance evaluation for that sector a bit more difficult. But of course, Nigerians are seeing what is going on, and we are saying we should see better performance in the goose that lays the golden egg. Finance, Minister of Finance, like I said, when they added humanitarian, some of the KPIs of humanitarian to him, you can see he's bogged down by a lot of things. But then changing the Minister of Finance is a big call. It's not about ethnicity, it's a big call at this point in time. But what did Mr. President do? Mr. President did some rearrangement that saw the movement of Dr. Doris from the Ministry of Industry and Trade to the Ministry of Finance and Minister of State. And I think that is more round peg in a round hole, in the sense that if you look at her track record, even though her background is in medicine, chunk of her almost 2 decades experience is in finance, a subsector of finance which is in banking rather than international trade. So I think she's an added value to Minister Wale Edu to see how they can be able to be more impactful in the area of finance in that regard.
All right. Baba Yusuf, Group CEO, Global Investment Trade Company. Thank you so much for your time on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Well, let's quickly bring you the news update.